The air inside the pyramid was thick. It was heavy with the dust of millennia. For weeks, a small team of dedicated archaeologists had been meticulously exploring a newly unsealed shaft deep within the Great Pyramid of Giza. This wasn't one of the grand chambers you see in documentaries. It was a tight, narrow passage, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. The team had been mapping it, inch by painstaking inch, expecting to find nothing more than maybe some forgotten tool marks or an unfinished corridor. The work was slow, grueling, and filled with the kind of quiet patience that defines archaeology. They believed they were simply adding a small footnote to a very large and well-read book of history. Then it happened. A remote camera pushed further down the shaft than any human could go, sent back an image that made everyone stop. There, nestled in a small, hidden cavity off the main passage, was a collection of objects. The initial reaction was pure, unfiltered excitement. Any discovery inside a pyramid is a big deal. But as the first high-resolution images started loading on the screen, that excitement shifted. It became something else entirely. It was confusion, then disbelief. The objects were clearly man-made, but they looked wrong. Their shapes, their materials, their very presence in this sacred place seemed to defy everything the team knew about ancient Egypt. The lead archaeologist, Dr. Kenji Tanaka, a man who had dedicated his entire life to the study of the Old Kingdom, stared at the monitor in stunned silence. The objects were not Egyptian. They didn't match the hieroglyphs, the sarcophagi, or the golden treasures of Tutankhamun. They looked older, stranger, and completely out of place. It was like finding a modern smartphone inside a medieval castle. The discovery was immediately classified, with only a handful of trusted experts brought in to consult. The initial thrill of finding something new was quickly replaced by the immense weight of what this could mean for our understanding of the past. The team knew they were standing on the edge of a historical precipice. The team had to proceed with extreme caution. Retrieving the artifacts would be a monumental task, requiring specialized robotics and a level of precision usually reserved for bomb disposal. Every move had to be documented, every fragment preserved. The initial discovery was made on March 12, 2025, a date that is now whispered in archaeological circles with a mix of awe and anxiety. For now, the world didn't know. The team worked under a self-imposed vow of silence, wrestling with the implications of their find. They were no longer just mapping a shaft. They were holding a secret that could potentially rewrite the first chapters of human civilization, a secret buried for thousands of years. When the first of the artifacts was finally brought to the surface and examined in a secure, climate-controlled lab, the mystery only deepened. The collection consisted of several items, none of which bore any resemblance to known dynastic Egyptian craftsmanship. One of the most stunning pieces was a small spherical object made from a strange obsidian-like material that was unnaturally smooth. It was covered in intricate geometric patterns that swirled around its surface, patterns that did not correspond to any known hieroglyphic or symbolic language. When analyzed, its material composition was found to contain trace elements not native to the Nile Valley or anywhere nearby for that matter. It felt ancient, yet impossibly advanced. Another object was a set of what looked like finely crafted tools. They were made from a metallic alloy that scientists are still struggling to identify. It was harder than copper or bronze, the typical metals of the era, and showed no signs of corrosion. These weren't crude implements. They were precise, almost surgical in their design, with sharp edges and ergonomic grips. Who would have needed such tools, and for what purpose? They were far too sophisticated for the quarrying and construction techniques we thought were used to build the pyramids. It suggested a level of metallurgical knowledge that simply shouldn't have existed in this part of the world thousands of years before the Iron Age. Perhaps the most perplexing find was a series of thin crystalline tablets. They were semi-translucent and etched with a script that baffled linguists. It wasn't hieratic, demotic, or any precursor script known to Egyptology. It looked more like a complex star chart or a circuit board diagram than a form of writing. Some experts speculated it might be a form of data storage, a concept that sounds like science fiction but was the only explanation that seemed to fit. The tablets were incredibly fragile, and the team worked around the clock to create a stable environment to prevent them from disintegrating. These weren't just artifacts, they were messages from a completely unknown culture. Together, these relics painted a picture of a culture that was not only present in the region before the pharaohs, but was also shockingly advanced. Their art, their technology, and their language were entirely alien to the Egyptian civilization we know. The term pre-dynastic suddenly felt inadequate. This wasn't a simple tribal culture hunting along the Nile. The evidence pointed to a sophisticated, organized society with a deep understanding of materials, science, astronomy, and perhaps even forms of technology we are only now beginning to comprehend. The relics were the calling card of a ghost civilization, one that had lived and vanished, leaving behind only these few enigmatic clues in the heart of Egypt's most iconic monument. The news, when it finally broke, was not a leak. It was a controlled detonation. Dr. Tanaka and his team published their preliminary findings in a special report on July 5, 2025. The reaction was immediate and explosive. The report sent shockwaves through the global scientific community, causing what some insiders described as outright panic. For over a century, the history of the pyramids was considered settled. They were tombs for the pharaohs built by the Egyptians of the 4th dynasty around 2500 BCE. This new discovery threw a massive wrench into that neat and tidy timeline. It challenged the very foundation of Egyptology. The debate erupted almost overnight. On one side were established Egyptologists who expressed deep skepticism, and rightly so. They argued that the find was impossible. Decades of research, archaeological digs, and textual analysis had built a powerful and consistent narrative of Egyptian history. There was no evidence anywhere else for this mysterious, advanced civilization. They suggested the artifacts might have been placed in the shaft much later, or that the dating was flawed. They demanded more proof, more peer-reviewed analysis, and more context. To them, accepting this find would mean admitting that the entire history of ancient Egypt as they knew it was incomplete or even wrong. On the other side were a growing number of scientists, geologists, and materials experts who argued that the evidence couldn't be ignored. The metallurgical analysis was sound. The geological context placed the artifacts deep within a sealed part of the pyramid, making later contamination highly unlikely. These experts rallied behind Dr. Tanaka, asserting that science must follow the evidence no matter how uncomfortable the conclusions. They suggested that perhaps we have been underestimating the complexity of the ancient world. This panic was not just about history, it was about the potential paradigm shift this discovery represented. It was a direct challenge to academic orthodoxy. The bombshell discovery forced everyone to reconsider long-held beliefs. The established theory is that Egyptian civilization developed gradually, from scattered pre-dynastic communities into the unified state that built the pyramids. This process is well documented through pottery, tombs, and early writings. There was no room in this timeline for a highly advanced, non-Egyptian culture to be operating on the Giza Plateau. The new relics suggested an entirely different narrative. What if the Egyptians didn't build on empty land? What if they built on the ruins or even the knowledge of a civilization that came before them? The very idea was academic heresy just a few months ago. As of today, July 10th, 2025, the story is far from over. In fact, it has only just begun. The initial report has raised far more questions than it has answered, and the scientific community is holding its collective breath, waiting for the next round of evidence. The artifacts are still undergoing intense analysis. Teams are working to decipher the strange script on the tablets, bombarding them with every analytical technique available. Carbon dating the organic residue found near the artifacts is a top priority, but the process is slow and must be done flawlessly to be considered credible. The world is watching, and every step of the process is under a microscope. The central mystery remains: who were these people? Where did they come from, and where did they go? There are no other traces of them, no cities, no tombs, no pottery shards scattered in the desert. It's as if they materialized on the Giza Plateau, left behind a few impossible objects, and then vanished from history. This lack of corroborating evidence is what makes the discovery so thrilling, but also so contentious. Could they have been a small, isolated group of geniuses? Or were they the survivors of a much larger civilization that was wiped out by some forgotten cataclysm, leaving the nascent Egyptian culture to rise in its wake? This discovery has reopened the door to questions that were once dismissed as fringe theories. While mainstream science still firmly rejects ideas of alien intervention, the find forces us to consider that human history might be more complex and cyclical than we imagined. Perhaps there have been other advanced civilizations on Earth that rose and fell long before recorded history. The relics in the pyramid could be the first concrete proof of such a lost chapter. The debate is no longer just about who built the pyramids, but about the very timeline of human innovation and the possibility of forgotten ancestors who were far more capable than we ever gave them credit for. The path forward is clear. More exploration is needed. Dr. Tanaka's team is already planning further robotic surveys of other unexplored shafts and cavities within the Giza complex. They are searching for more clues, for anything that can add context to their unbelievable find. The excitement is palpable. We are living through a potential revolution in our understanding of the ancient world. The pyramids have always guarded their secrets well, but it seems one of their biggest secrets has finally been revealed. The mystery is no longer about how the pyramids were built, but by whom and what other secrets they might still be hiding.